Hi, I'm Janet Gross. Welcome to Coping Today, a place where we highlight mental health issues that many of us face. And as always, Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling and behavioral sciences at the University of Holy Cross, joins us to talk about these things. And today, Dr. Roy, we're talking about gaslighting.
Yes.
A lot of people know that from either, they've seen the movie,
right,
or it's happened to them or a friend of theirs, and it's not nice.
It's not nice, and it's quite prevalent, actually, and just, you mentioned the movie. Back in the 1940s, there was a movie called Gaslight. Gaslighting comes from that movie, whereby there was a partner, and this interesting dynamic between two individuals was turning off and turning on this gaslight, making their partner think that they were imagining things, that thinking that it was on when it was off or off when it was on, and really working to make this person think that they were losing their mind. And so that tactic doesn't only happen in the movies. It's something that, a technique and a tactic that some people quite nefariously use. Some do it very intentionally, some not so intentionally, depending on what type of mind they may have. They may not necessarily be aware that they're doing this, but nevertheless, it happens quite frequently. So much so that it's actually now a term in Webster's dictionary.
Yeah, wasn't it like the word of the year?
It was the word of the year. It was.
Yeah.
Yes, it made it to be the word of the year.
Yeah, I know. I was talking to somebody, they said, I don't think young people know what gaslight is. Are you kidding me? Of course they do, because now it, even without the movie,
right?
They know. They may not even know about the gaslight dimming, and that was the clue to what was something bad was happening, but they know.
They know because they experience it. They may have someone in their life that is either doing it to them, or they know of someone that has experienced being gaslighted, gaslit by someone else. And so what does that look like? It's a person making someone else think that something was said or not said, something took place or didn't take place, for the purpose of having that person doubt their own experience, doubt their knowledge, doubt themselves. And when someone starts to doubt themselves, they're a lot more, it's easier to control.
Yeah, it's more vulnerable.
More vulnerable and easier to control. And so the purpose of gaslighting is to control someone else, to dominate them in such a way that if you dominate a person's mind, if they're not sure of their own reality, if they question their own experience, then that person is more susceptible to whatever it is that the aggressor is saying and doing.
And sometimes it's not for any other purpose than to gain that control, right? It doesn't have to be because I want your money, or what I want something else from you. I want you. I want to control you.
And this is very common in domestic violence situations. There are different types of domestic violence. There's the type that we know that's very physical in nature, where you may have one partner that physically assaults another partner or sexually assaults another partner. But there's also psychological domestic violence, where it's emotional abuse, psychological abuse. Maybe they don't lay a hand on you. Maybe they don't attack you physically, but they attack you emotionally and psychologically. And getting you to doubt yourself and to doubt your experiences is a tactic that is often used by perpetrators in a domestic violence situation.
And sometimes it's to the point where the victim is afraid to tell anybody because they think they're losing it,
Because how do you prove this?
Yeah.
How do you prove something subjective, something abstract? If you yourself question it, what is the likelihood that someone else would also question it? It's like, well, why would they do that? Why would that be happening? It's like, are you sure? And then you have others that perhaps are contributing unwittingly to questioning whether in fact what they're experiencing is accurate.
Is the gaslighter, are they often charismatic? I mean, are they often, so they can put on a pretty good front?
Yes, and that charisma, that charismatic front that they put on is a very specific criteria for a person with antisocial personality disorder, or perhaps some sort of sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. So they may have that personality disorder. Oftentimes a person with a personality disorder is someone who has the skill set to be able to manipulate situations in such a way that the survivor of gaslighting, as well as those around them, question or don't question what the perpetrator is doing.
So you really can't even rely on, as the victim, you can't rely on other people's perception of that guy or woman.
Because they can schmooze them with their charisma and say, well, no,
I've
they
never
wouldn't
seen
do that.
Yeah, they're such a nice person,
Right.
or whatever. So that's kind of scary in itself, because it can, as we know, when someone takes or crushes your self-confidence, your self-esteem, it's a difficult ladder to climb back out of.
It is.
Especially without support.
And it's very isolating. You feel alone.
Yeah.
Because you don't know that you can count on your own experience at this point. If you can't even count on your own faculties, your own experience, then you don't know what you can count on.
Yeah, okay. And there is help.
Yes, there is help.
Okay. All right, and before we take a break, I want to bring up that the University of Holy Cross and the Maronites, they have help available.
Yes. For 4+ years now, we've been offering free telemental health services to residents of Louisiana. So anyone who is experiencing any type of relational issue, interpersonal struggles, psychological in nature, you can call the number on the screen, and the assistant will go ahead and transfer that call to the clinical director, assign that counselor in training to you, and you get free telemental health services free of charge, as long as you need it, here in the state of Louisiana, if you're a resident of Louisiana.
Man, that's such a service, and the number will be up during the show. So, okay, well, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, how to tell if you're being gaslighted and what to do about it. Stay with us.
Women know how to get things done. Invest in women and girls, and they will do the rest. Join us at care.org/women-know-how.
Welcome back. Talking about gaslighting, mental manipulation that can be so destructive. We're joined now by licensed professional counselor, Dr. Anna Rivera. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we want to talk about the signs of gaslighting, how you know, is this happening to you?
Yes, certainly. So the gaslighter will use several tactics, manipulative tactics, to confuse their victim. And this is done over a period of time. And to where the victim will eventually lose their sense of reality and even their self-worth, which is when it can become just conflictive for their mental health. And so in just a general sense, I can tell you what those tactics are, and if you like, I can go deeper into that a little bit later. But so you have, the denial of reality, minimizing, the twisting of narratives, projecting, isolating the victim, gaslighting by proxy, constantly criticizing.
Gaslighting by proxy. Let's talk about a couple.
Yes.
So that's like you have a or you just convince other people to help you.
So the gaslighter, you need to keep in mind that they're master manipulators. They're not just trying to manipulate you. They try to manipulate everyone in their environment. So they may use those people against you if they can't coerce you or control you.
And this would be helping without knowing it. That's for the co-conspirators, quote
Definitely,
unquote.
definitely,
Okay. So
yes.
they do have, as Roy and I were talking about, there is, a charisma about the person, which helps him get the co-conspirators in without them knowing.
Yes, they're very skillful. So at the beginning, these individuals are usually very charismatic. They make you feel really special. They see your weakness and they give you needs that have not been met with others in your life. So that's kind of like how they reel you in at first.
So they're perceptive in their search for control.
Yes. I think they're highly skillful and
very
smart.
much so, and it's very interesting because they are able to pick up on those who have vulnerabilities, those who have had perhaps other experiences, someone who perhaps has an insecurity. They can sniff it out. It's almost like they can smell it on you. So people who are looking to control someone, people who are looking to perpetrate against someone, a bully even in elementary school, they know that person's vulnerable, the way that they walk, the way that they carry themselves, the way that they don't engage in eye contact. That person has low self-esteem, that person is weak, they're an easy target, let me go and do my thing, whether it's conscious or subconscious. But that's who they go after. The perpetrator looks for someone who they perceive to be vulnerable, the wounded gazelle. And so they're not going to go for someone who presents themselves as strong and secure. They're going to go for someone who presents themselves to the world as insecure and vulnerable. And so they're an easy target.
So does that mean really you, if you take that out to where they can manipulate others, you can't even necessarily count on your friends as for direction here?
You see, and that's very important what you just brought up, because one of their tactics is to isolate you. So it's very important that you recognize that as a red flag. When a gaslighter, when a person in general, you don't know he's a gaslighter yet, is trying to isolate you from family, from friends, from people, any support networks that you have, that needs to be an indicator to you that there might be something there to look out for.
And they may even isolate you within a social situation. They might make you the butt of the joke, or it's, oh my gosh, oh, you're so clumsy, or oh, if she didn't have any sense, she wouldn't have, she wouldn't, whatever comments that they would make. And then others kind of join in the laughter, and they feel like they're connected in somehow, and then that person gets isolated that way. And so they're very skilled, because through their charisma, at being able to do that.
So and is it hard to recognize at first? Or like you said, you need to be aware, and I guess in any new relationship you should be aware of where it's going, friends or, you know, romantic things.
Definitely. So, you know, I think it's important to note that I think we're all capable, to an extent, consciously or unconsciously, of being manipulative.
Sure.
But the gaslighter will always take it a step further. So just to give you an example, right? So we were talking about, you know, kind of like the denial of reality and the blame shifting. So let's take the example of a couple that's facing the issue of infidelity. And the victim will approach the gaslighter and say, you know, is something going on? Are you seeing someone? And the gaslighter will say something like, that's ridiculous. I'm not seeing anyone. You're imagining things. But that's not as bad. Where they take it a step further is where they tell you something like, no, but you know what I'm tired of is you being a mistrusting, unhinged lunatic. And so not only do they avoid the confrontation, not only do they avoid taking accountability for the infidelity, but they leave the victim sitting there with the weight of the accusation of being an unhinged lunatic. So that's an example.
Wow. And there's some other stuff, like initially it was all great, 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 so they do have respect for this person, right? So they might think, am I? Is that what you're saying? At some point it becomes that when they accuse you of being an unhinged lunatic, you're sitting there going, am I?
Yeah, because then other stuff starts happening, right?
Yeah.
So taking it to the blame shifting, right? Let's keep with that example. So let's say that the victim has a picture, a recording, you know, just evidence that he or she is cheating, right? And in that case, the gaslighter will say something like, well, you know, you've been working long hours, I've been lonely, I feel neglected, so I cheated, but it's your fault that I cheated. You know, so they always have a way of turning it back on you. And just with those examples that we just talked about, you can see how over a period of time, it can be so damaging to a victim to, you know, never get an apology, to never have the gaslighter confront their accountability, and then on top of that, to throw it on you and claim that you're at fault for their negative behavior. Like, that's very devastating over time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we were talking off air, you know, any relationship starts, the victim is made to feel so special. So cared for and loved and just wonderful, and that's what draws you in. Love bombing, I think, is what. But then it turns into something else.
Then it turns into something else. But you know, you were speaking earlier about how they do target people that are highly sensitive, very empathic individuals, you know, that maybe by that point they've normalized this sort of behavior because it's happened in their families before. And so it's very easy to make that person a target because they need so much. They've been deprived of so much already, that when you make them feel like the center of the world, you make them feel so special, you know, later on, this person kind of doesn't recognize or doesn't want to see as well. Because no, when I met him, he was so wonderful. He made me feel great. You know, I was so important to him. And so you kind of keep staying yourself in that form of denial. But meanwhile, they're also using all these other tactics, you know, to.
And that form of denial is easy to fall into that trap when you have certain needs in your life that weren't met by a caregiver, by someone earlier in your life, and then that perpetrator is able to pick up on that. It's like, oh, they are missing this. They're missing this need. So let me go ahead and fill that need. I'll step into that void and offer them what they need, whether it's security, safety, shelter, food, whatever it may be, they offer that basic need, and then the bond develops. There's that bond that develops with the survivor and the perpetrator. And then once that happens, once you have that psychological connection, it's very difficult to break away from it if you have now trusted that person because they have love bombed you and they've created the conditions for you to bond with them. To unbond is a challenge emotionally and psychologically, and now they're in. And then they switch, and then they do whatever it is that they do to start manipulating you and make you question your reality.
So why would you stay? What is that bond that makes you stay then with someone who is?
You know, I think especially in the later phases of being with an individual like this, you know, at that point, you've been so deprived of affection and validation that you've gotten accustomed on living on crumbs of that. So you'll do anything to make it stop. You know, one of the, I think the ultimate measures, I think, of the gaslighter is to withhold affection and validation, because when they do that, they start giving you the silent treatment, the cold shoulder. And at that point, the victim will do anything to make it stop. So I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to put aside my feelings, and sadly, I'm going to comply with what the gaslighter wants.
Wow. And that's exactly what he wants. Yeah,
that's exactly what he wants.
It's more, you know. When we were talking, I heard it described as mental malware, where they put something in your brain and it just, you know, short circuits the reasonability, or you know, your reason and your wait. So how do you get out of it? How do you not turn the tables, but how do you escape?
Great question. Being aware, because you're not aware as the survivor of this tactic. You're not necessarily aware because you're invested, you're connected emotionally, psychologically, because it's not necessarily a physical thing that's happening. It's not like physical assault where you can feel that pain, or sexual assault where you're aware of something that's happening that's not wanted. This is so abstract and subtle and nuanced that, well, it's not that big of a deal. And then you yourself, independent of what they may or may not do, you yourself brush it off. You yourself push it aside because what you did receive, the positive, good attention that you received, is so good or good enough that you want more of that. And you're going to stay with the bad things because along with it, well, I'll take the good with the bad, or you take the bad with the good. And so you kind of start rationalizing yourself, because if I want this, I'm going to just accept this as well, because it's better to have this with this, the bad with the good, than not have the good at all. And so a person has to be aware that that's not a way to operate, that you can be in a relationship, you can be in a situation where you're not being manipulated by a person in this way.
Is that hard to just say that this isn't love? I mean, don't you need, I would need friends, I would need somebody, or I might, you know, somebody else to go, yeah, what are you doing here? You can get out of this. This is not right. But it or she has alienated your friends.
Right. You know, in those situations, whenever I've had a client that's confronting this issue, you know, you immediately notice as well that their self-esteem has been corroded. You know, their confidence is just not there. But when they're still really good about empathizing with other people's experiences. And so I will ask them to look at that situation from a different perspective. If your best friend, right, came to you and said that this was happening in their relationship, what would your reaction be? You'd be like, no, this is nonsensical. You know, this is crazy. You should not allow this in your life. You know, you deserve better than this. So why don't you have that compassion with yourself? You know, why don't you feel deserving of someone who doesn't feel like they need to do this to you? To have you.
Yeah.
You know, and to that point, it's important to be able to look at other dynamics outside of yourself within the dynamic which you find yourself. That when you see that other people don't operate that way, it's like, I'm noticing other people don't operate this way, yet in this dynamic, the one in which I find myself, it's happening. And it's a lot easier when you are able to objectively look at something else in an intellectual, cognitive way, and be objective in that way, as opposed to something that you're experiencing and feeling affectively. It's the emotional connection that clouds things. When you're able to see something objectively as a third-party observer in terms of how other dynamics are, people can bring that to your attention, and then maybe you bring it to your own attention and work to disconnect and put aside a toxic relationship in which someone is gaslighting you.
Is this something that normally goes on until the gaslighter just gets tired of it, or can it be the lifestyle of a couple or a family?
I think it can happen, those both scenarios. Like many of these scenarios can happen. I have had clients who decide ultimately to continue to stay in a relationship where they will be gaslit, and and that's for whatever reasons they decide to stay, right? What you can work on is, well, how can you manage? How can you have coping mechanisms to manage with what the gaslighter brings? But I do note with those clients, look, this is not going to change, probably. You're going to actively have to learn other coping mechanisms, because the gaslighter is very smart. Like, they will catch on, if you're trying to manage, if you're trying to not feel so affected by their gaslighting. What they want is your reaction. What they want is for you to be devastated by what they do to you. So it's a long time journey that that you have to take on.
So can you be assured that this is not real love? This is not the way it's supposed to be. I know you can try and fool yourself, but
it depends, and there's so many. It's a continuum. There's milder levels of it to more severe levels of it, and so it can go sideways really quickly if you perhaps put the brake on it and start to establish boundaries, and you say, no, I'm going to respect myself enough to say enough. Then that person who feels like they've lost control, if they are an extreme, severe person with a personality disorder, perhaps could turn into a fatal situation, versus something that's more mild in nature, where the person will just say, well, I can't manipulate this person anymore. I'm done with you. I'm moving on, which,
Those are the lucky ones.
Those are the lucky ones,
Those
right?
are lucky victims.
So it's smart to be aware of this,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
see it, like you said, look for red flags in your relationships.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
sounds so pessimistic. It came out of my mouth, and I'm like, who wants to go into any relationship like that? But I guess it's reality.
I guess being aware, just be
Right.
aware of what can symbolize a red flag.
And
for
don't
a
always question yourself. Question what's happening, huh?
And don't isolate yourself. Keep people around you that love you and care for you and can bring this to your attention. For sure.
That's great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Anna
Great
Rivera.
conversation. Thanks.
Really, it's enlightening, even though, hey, I've watched the movie, so.
It's a
But
great
It is a great movie.
I
It is-
haven't seen it,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
okay. And you don't really have to see it to know that this has existed long before the movie, too.
Yes.
Dr. Roy and I were talking about that. It's been forever and ever. People are trying to manipulate you and get what they
Yes,
want. so.
always.
And sometimes we're one of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, Anna Rivera, for talking about this with us and for helping us to understand the manipulation and recognize it. We're going to be talking more about this in a minute. Stay with us.
Is it okay to call you Mom?
Of course you can.
And we're back talking about walking through the darkness of gaslighting, that manipulative behavior that seeks to control and crush another's sense of self-worth. It's horrible. It's, all the things we've been talking about in the show are just, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it happen to other people.
Right.
And for some reason, sometimes people keep it a secret, try to keep it a secret that it's happening to them.
Because you're not even aware that it's happening initially. We all second guess ourselves from time to time, like, oh, did I do that? I thought I turned off the iron, or I thought I turned off the stove, and did I leave the light on? Let me double check that, because we can experience that. We know that those things happen in terms of having a gas light on or off, or a stove on or off, or iron on or off. Because of that experience, when somebody says something like, no, that's not true, that didn't happen that way, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's true. And so we don't think of it initially. The thing is, if that's happening repeatedly, if there's a pattern of this, nothing happens consistently in this nature. Yes, there are times where I second guess whether I have left the stove on or off, and I get out of my car and go back to make sure, or the iron. But that doesn't happen every day.
Right.
Has that happened in my life? Sure, it's happened in my life, but it doesn't happen every day. The thing is, if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're constantly being told that what you believe to be reality and true and your experiences is inaccurate, that's not normal. That doesn't happen every day. If that's a pattern that you're noticing, trust your instincts. This is not the way things operate.
So, as you go into a new friend, you know what? This doesn't have to be a romantic thing either.
Right. It doesn't have to be a romantic thing. It could be with two friends.
Yeah.
It could be with an employer and employee, parent and child. any type of interpersonal dynamic between two people, gaslighting can take place.
So as you go into this and you start to have these feelings, is it wise to ask ahead of time, like not ahead of time, but right at the beginning and say, you know, he says or she says that I'm doing this a lot. Do I do this a lot? They also say this. So somebody else knows before the gaslighter gets to them.
Right, right. And it's important to bring it up. If you are aware of something, or if you're starting to wonder about something, yes, please involve somebody else. Highly recommend that you involve somebody else. But also confront the gaslighter. Let them know, no. Try challenging that person. Now, I caution with the challenging if it is too far into it, and because there's a continuum, as we mentioned earlier. You could have someone who is dangerous, who it could turn fatal. It can go wrong relatively quickly if you are in a situation where you're confronting someone and you're isolated. If you're going to confront someone, it's important that you do so in a very safe manner for yourself, so that you can create that boundary and know that that they know that you're aware that something's happening.
So somebody else is watching.
Right.
So, and that might be enough to just have them move on to another target.
Right, and they do, because they're cowards. They're cowards. They don't want to be challenged. They want something that they can control and manipulate. If it becomes a challenge, then they move on to something else.
Okay. Any tips before we go?
Well, trust your instincts. So if you feel that this is happening, be aware of that. Validate your feelings. Your feelings are communicating something to you. Listen to what they say. Check for denial or avoidance in the perpetrator. Be aware of the trivializing things that you say or do. Notice the blame shifting. Watch for isolation. Monitor your self-esteem and set that boundaries. It's clearly important to set boundaries with anyone that you come in contact with, in particular someone who's gaslighting you.
Boundaries to protect yourself.
To protect yourself. That's self-respect, and say, nope, up to that point, no more. I love myself and respect myself enough to not permit you to treat me this way.
Okay, I love that. That's standing up for yourself and probably for others.
Yes.
Anything. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Roy Salgado, as always, and our guest today, Dr. Anna Rivera, and of course, all of your colleagues at the University of Holy Cross. We thank them too. And thank you for watching and for being a part of Coping Today.